All of the food we eat and much of the clothing we wear comes from plants and animals that are raised on farms. Farms are different in type, in size, and even in name.
Welcome to Barn Talk. What happens at the barn stays in the barn, but not today. We're going to let it all out for you guys. I was informed that our intro is getting old, Dad.
What?
Our intro, it's getting old. People are getting tired of it. They skip through it.
No.
So,
blasphemy.
I feel like we just got to go lightning round.
Okay.
Just go fast with it.
We'll just do it the way we always do it, but have Cat play it 1.5x speed.
Like we're talking like rabbits.
Yep.
Yeah, we're just going to keep it short. If you get any value from the show, share it out to people that you know. That's how we can grow the show, guys. Best way to grow a podcast. If you love the show, let us know what you think. Leave a review on Spotify or Apple. Helps out the show tremendously. And got a direct-to-consumer meat business that we started. You can always use code BARNTALK to save 10% off your order. Would love to have your support on that. Dad's holding up some nice pork sticks there. That
One bonus is our new packaging. Look at that sexy packaging. Nice. It has this real easy open. Look at that. You just pull it open. And I had to go and get, these are the ends, because there are no more regular packs of pork sticks left. But I don't know, are you selling these on the site?
I'm not going to sell the ends because I think people would bitch.
That's awesome, because Torque's going to eat every last one of them.
Yeah, so we're not going to give people the ends, just give them the regular sticks. But yeah, always you can use code BARNTALK to save 10% off. We appreciate the hell out of you guys, and we got a really great guest coming to the barn today. So, guy that has been in the meat business. He's a fifth-generation cattleman out of Nebraska. Really doing some cool things out there when it comes to bringing a farm-raised, fresh, sustainable product to the marketplace in his local community, but also nationwide. He's also finding a lot of ways to help out other farmers that want to get into the direct-to-consumer space, and he's been doing it for a minute now, so I think there's a lot of value that we can gain, a lot of insight that we can gain on the direct-to-consumer side of meat and just creating your own market and trying to bring value to your own operation. This guy knows a lot about it, and I'm super stoked, and I can't wait to get into it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Blake Albers, welcome to Barn Talk. Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, appreciate the invite.
Yeah, so before we get started and get in the nitty-gritty, how do people find you if they get any value from the show, they want to check out your stuff, see what you're up to? How do they find your stuff?
For cattle and beef commentary and a little bit of family stuff, probably a lot more than some guys want. I'm on Twitter at Blake Albers, or X, if you will. If we're alberscraftmeats.com on our website, and then I've got an Instagram, personal Instagram that's open. It's just Blake Albers.
I feel like I could probably just get up, run to town, get a snack, because you two are both meat business people, and I don't think you really need me. I think I'm just going to be here as fringe.
You're going to help fill in the gaps.
Okay.
I think you got a lot more to talk about than what you think.
Okay. All right. Well,
he's got a multitude of things, not just meat. I mean, meat's his thing, but he does some other stuff too. So we're going to get into it, but I guess just tell us what you're up to today. You know, what do you got all going? We'll get into like the backstory and all that, but like what's cooking in your world right now?
So right now, today, we're a USDA-inspected further processing facility, primarily focused on family beef brands, smaller projects. You know, if a distributor needs a portion or a cut and wrap for a limited line or something they're trying out. And we do a lot of smoked and value-added products. But yeah, we're a USDA-inspected facility with a pretty, I would say, I put it this way. If it was sitting in a strip mall or in a singular building itself, our retail would be considered successful. I look at it a different way. I want retail to carry the entire weight of the fixed costs of a very large facility. So I'm like, it could always be better. But independently of what's behind the retail wall, we're pretty happy with the way that's going. And it's just become, something we're trying to make an extension of our family farm and a business that my wife and I own independently of our greater family. And that's kind of what we're working on.
So let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about the family business, the farm. Where did it start? What does your family do? And how did you kind of come back and do what you're doing today?
Well, nobody romanticizes or falls in love with a meat grinder and a processing floor. I mean, there were a lot of doors in redirection by God or markets or a combination of both. But back it up. My family has a farm in Wisner, Nebraska, 6 miles north of town. We row crop, feed cattle, and then they've got some convenience stores and just a lot of family. We've got a lot of family working together, and it's awesome. We can feed our one-time capacity. There's about 20,000 head. A lot of custom cattle feeding, and then kind of what we call inside cattle, which would be my dad and uncle and brothers and whatever family members end up feeding for their own agricultural participation, if you will.
Yep.
And so I came back in 2012 with an ag econ degree, was working on the outside. But at that point, I'd always been really interested in markets. And I think in 2011, it was like Fukushima or something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So Fukushima, I was trading, and then Fukushima happened, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And I ran the numbers, and I was like, we really ought to be buying this. And that was my first big, all right, this works. This is fun. I was a broke college student 2 years ago. Now we're moving.
Yeah.
And so I got into that, did some internships, worked more in the futures industry, but it was always a hybrid. I was still, feed crew on weekends until I think 2016, and outside in the afternoons. And my brother joined shortly thereafter, and he's always been more row crop focused and on the outside management type things. And so as that kind of developed, we got into where we had a complete divorce of livestock prices with the meat, right? And so my first foray into the meat business was essentially, out of spite. Like, we're going to make this work. There's too much margin to be had there.
Yeah.
And of course, you quickly find out it's very hard to balance up the animal carcass.
Yep.
And it's very hard to scale.
Yep.
So we went to work on that and built a butcher shop. I thought that would help alleviate some pain. That did not. It just gave us more and more of a reason that, I kept pushing and kept pushing. We had some success on the e-commerce side, and it got to a point where, are we going to do this and be in the meat business or not? Because I've got 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and it's not working for anybody. It was working well enough to sustain itself, but I couldn't see where we were going to build equity or spin off somebody's wage, which is, part of the family business idea is like, let's create some jobs first.
Yep.
And then if there's opportunity for people to create equity, that's the next step.
Right.
On and on. And so I felt like we either have to cease to do this or we have to do it right. And it's when I started planning out a further processing facility. I felt pretty passionately about not doing kill, not becoming a locker. I liked the idea of bringing in box beef. I like the idea of having maximum flexibility there. And long story short, that's how we ended up there with this processing facility. We bought that building a couple years ago, and then we got the construction done and got moving through some product USDA inspected in October.
Okay.
So
when you started the locker, you had a business as long as everybody in the family was involved, wasn't taking a wage, it worked okay. Was it that kind of deal?
When it was a butcher shop.
So the butcher, it was like when you say butcher shop, it was kind of just retail?
Just retail.
Okay.
Yep, just retail. And,
Okay.
and we put it in the wrong spot.
Okay.
It would have been more successful in our town of 1,200. It really would have been. We put it in a town of 26,000. We were one of the first, everybody redid their downtown.
Yep.
About 10 years ago, that was the big push. And we were one of the first businesses to go into the downtown Norfolk that was new, fresh. And we just didn't have the foot traffic. And so what my wife and I did, and she was in dental school at this time, to her credit, she helped me manage all this. To make it work, we put in a tasting bar, and we would have these, big taco nights and tequila, and we would cook for everybody. We had a single air fryer in the back for steak tips. That was the most profitable piece of equipment I've ever owned, and it was like $60, and we'd turn out thousands of dollars of these things. But it was requiring us to live like a bar lifestyle.
Yeah.
And she was in dental school, so we'd drive back and forth every day, and then at night she would help me serve. My sister would help, and we would host people there until they had to leave, and that actually worked great. So I take it back. It wasn't that bad. It was just not the perfect lifestyle.
Right.
And then COVID hit, and you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So shoulder to shoulder events in a
didn't work.
butcher shop / bar weren't allowed. So we went in and started doing delivery and more e-commerce. And that worked really pretty good for quite a while. And then if you remember correctly, and I don't remember the exact dates, I kind of try and block this out. But the supply chain took a long time to actually break down.
Yep.
It took a lot longer than any one of us would have thought.
Yep.
So as that consumer spending ramped up, all of a sudden FedEx and UPS could not deliver a box.
Yep.
It didn't matter if I put 30 pounds of dry ice in this thing. It
wasn't going to get there on time.
Yeah. And of course, we were at peak. At that point, we were shipping about 60 or 70 boxes a day, and had quite a few dollars out on the road. And then we had to reship because we didn't want to lose those customers, and we reshipped. And by the end of it, it ended up being about a six-figure issue, just into the six-figure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we decided to take more control, focus more on the retail. We're right at home, brick and mortar. And I'm glad we did that, because it has built us a predictable base to now launch more of our processing for hire, and to work more towards getting back to where we were e-commerce wise.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for sticking with us. As a member of Iowa Corn Growers Association, you'll gain access to valuable resources and exclusive industry insights, and a powerful network of over 7,000 fellow corn farmers just like you. Whether you're seeking advocacy at the State House or strategies that boost your farm's bottom line, we've got you covered. By joining, you're adding your voice to a unified force that fights for policies that matter to Iowa's corn growers, ensuring your interests are represented where it counts and when it counts. You'll also benefit from attending networking and learning opportunities such as regional roundtables, meetings, and crop fairs, allowing you to continually stay connected and ahead of the curve. We're committed to amplifying the voice of Iowa farmers every day, protecting your interest and ensuring that your voice is heard. Join today and be a part of something bigger, a community that knows the value of hard work and the importance of letting your voice be heard. Visit iowacorn.org and become part of the team that's leading the way for Iowa's corn farmers. Now, let's get back to it.
So now you have like a facility that it's a cutting facility essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're cut and wrap, smoke, grind. We've got some vacuum tumblers that work really nice, and then and kind of high-end packaging, individual 10-pound cases, and then we actually fulfill for 2 of our customers as well.
So you guys are doing e-commerce out of there, and you have a retail front.
Yep.
Part of it too.
Yep.
and then you're doing it for 2 other farms then that want their own brands.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They've been a really good example of what we can kind of do. We had one that's going to probably end up almost with $1,400 an animal and further processing. They're doing every little thing on these first few kills, down to a beef bacon or snack sticks, every flavor of snack stick. And then we had another one, a large ranch where the value of their middle meats are so high because they're a known quantity and known name. We only did $230 worth of further processing on those animals, and we've just been working through the rest of that product, trying to help them move it. So.
Yeah. So you guys don't slaughter there? They get them slaughtered somewhere else and then bring them to you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
gotcha.
and that can add a little bit of cost, but it adds so much flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And it lets us focus on marketing.
Yeah.
And frankly, if nobody shows up to work, Jesse and I can run a knife and a grinder.
Yeah.
I don't want to slaughter cattle too.
Yeah, it takes a different kind of cat to do the front end of
kill
it.
floor is something different.
It is. I'll even go through these big plants and I'm just mesmerized on the fab side. And then we get over to the kill side and say there's a smell, I mean, they're clean, don't get me wrong.
All the awful,
and you don't have the market for those things that a larger plant can. And so that's the biggest issue. It's like, okay, then I already have to deal with 500 little packages off of this animal. Now I'm going to deal with another 10, 12 items on the front end that are sometimes worth something, sometimes aren't.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so that was the choice we made, and it just fit my budget. It fit, my comfort level, and it fit the building we went into. So we didn't build a new building. We went into a 1981 Coors Light distributorship.
Nice.
So,
cool. Open space.
Yes. It was just a big open space. They had a big cooler because of the Coors Light kegs and the cold chain. And that worked really awesome. It's been good. So we can actually build this plant out very modular.
Yeah.
One by one. Our first cutting packaging room is in. We could double that up, or we could add a ton of smokehouses. We'll see how it goes. Yep. And right now we're using that extra space for fulfillment, but we don't necessarily have to. We have another couple drive-throughs where they used to fill the trucks that we're renting out now. That
you could move too.
Yeah. So it was a flexible space, is the right building, right time, and it worked with our business plan really well.
That's awesome. That's really great, man.
So when you were a kid.
Well, I wanted to ask one more thing about the facility.
All right.
On the kill floor, do you feel like the regulation from the USDA? Because what I've heard from people that do it all is you can get shut down faster on the kill floor than anywhere else, because if you don't stun an animal the right way, they're gonna shut you down real easy. Have you noticed not having a kill floor, it just limits your liability? Or is they still just up your butt?
It's again, I think it's just another thing to deal with.
Yeah.
I've walked into, we use a co-packer that can kill up to 120 head a day. He could maybe do more. I haven't asked lately, but I walked in there. This is the first time I ever walked into a kill floor. I went in for a Wagyu customer of mine, and we were the only customer that day. They were just going to fab our 35 head. And it was so peaceful in there, and the cooler was beautiful, crisp, clean, and the cattle all looked good hanging there. That was the only time I ever thought, maybe I could do this.
Yeah.
maybe I could do this, because usually, it's a pretty high stress, high stakes thing. And fortunately, we've never had a lot of drama. I've killed a lot of cattle there. We've had one condemned. I don't even know why. But it was just something that wasn't broken, that I'd tried before.
Yep.
And my wife was on board, right? We weren't even married. We probably were just engaged. And we toured a cut and wrap facility that they do 700,000 pounds now. And we were using them, and we were just like, this is the part we could do.
Yeah.
And that became the path we set down. Now, I don't think we would have ever thought we would have built the one we have now as big as we did, but the building and it just all kind of
fell into place.
Yeah.
Cool.
You know, because what you could do when you don't have kill, you're on a you have to have a USDA inspector there, obviously, but on the kill side, but on the further processing side, you're on a patrol. You're basically showing them your label claims. You're showing them your negative E. coli and Listeria tests. You're working through anything that they have jurisdiction over, and pre-op is a huge thing. You know, pre-op is they'll come through and kind of release the facility. So we go in the morning and we say, did sanitation do their job?
Yep.
If they didn't do their job, we fail ourselves. We clean again, and then we release the facility.
Yep.
So that's kind of the touch points of the USDA. And I will say this, I'm sure people have more or less trouble with that. It isn't as big of a hurdle as people might think. And they are just looking out for the best interests of the consumer. And in turn, they're looking out for your best interests. Mm-hmm. So you can kind of look at them as a quality assurance person that's kind of on staff, if you will. And one thing we did right out the gate was hire a consultant. I'm not a big consultant guy, but we did on the food safety stuff. And that has been the best money we spent.
Yep. That's smart. Yeah. I hear stories, some people saying USDA is up their butt. I don't want to go federal. You know, I'd rather stay CIS or, you know, just there's different opinions out there, but that's probably a good way of looking at it because it's inevitable. You got to have them be there. So it's like, just do the right things. You just got to do it right.
Yeah. And some of the things, you know, do seem to add a step or be counterintuitive, but for the most part, they're just like, we got to have a clean facility. Let's all agree on that. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's pretty easy to agree with. And then the downstream things. And the other thing you got to remember is it's your food safety plan. They're there to enforce your food safety plan. Now they have temperature guidelines if you're cooking or guidelines if you are, you know, you have a product go out of temp. So let's say you're processing in here and this is a cold room and your refrigeration breaks down and that thing goes over by a degree. Well, we have to document that, get it in the cooler and cool it back down within X amount of time. They have guidelines for that kind of stuff. But as far as everything else, you know, how you do your paperwork, they're there to enforce what you said you were going to do.
Yeah. Yep.
And so if you work with a good consultant, a lot of that stuff can really kind of be alleviated. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, because you hear a lot of people also talk just like, you hear the theory of, oh, they don't want small town or they don't want small plants. They want the big guys want to push the small guys out. And so the USDA is more they're putting regulations on the smaller guys and they're pushing the small guys out harder. And it's like, I don't know. Do you feel like that's true or
I
don't see that?
Yeah. No, I think the USDA has made a concerted effort to try and make this more doable for small plants.
Yeah. Yep. And that's what we need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will go back just a little bit because so growing up on your operation, when you were thinking about where life was going to take you, what did you think you were going to do? Because like you said in the beginning, it wasn't standing in front of a meat grinder.
Yeah, I had this conversation with a friend of mine yesterday. It is shocking how different my life is than what I thought, expected, wanted. But there's probably a little more opportunity at this point. And if there isn't, I feel very strongly about the generational thing. So if this makes that more robust, then I think it was a huge win. Yep. You know, there's 3 families in our business, and then there's 9 grandkids. So there's 9 cousins, I guess, at some point.
Yeah.
And they're going to get married.
Yep.
And we have a lot of very capable people in my family. My brother is a really good livestock health guy. My brother Chase, the second oldest, my brother Perry, he's your row crop guy, manure management, keeps the guys moving. He's great there. Obviously I've got a smattering of talents that I'm trying to execute on. And then I've got a cousin who's really great that's worked for some livestock advisory groups and then on to livestock banking now.
Yep.
So we're really lucky in a way, but I always go back to like the fifth generation thing. We like to say that. It sounds cool. We've been around a long time. The marketing people that I do have, which are, at a kind of a limited level, they like putting that out there.
Absolutely.
And I remember I got this comment on X a few months ago and just boiled my blood. And a guy, I posted a video from our processing plant. It was just like, and probably subsidized by that fifth generation farm. It's like, number one, so what if it is? It isn't. Britt and I own it. But the fifth generation thing is more complicated.
100%.
It's not, it doesn't make it better. The cool thing is you have an established business with an established equity base, with established banking relationships, with all these systems in place. That's one thing we're really struggling with besides food safety is getting systems in place. How do I make all this work without people being stressed out or feeling like they're frenzied? At Herb Albers Feedlot, everybody knows what needs to be done. And that is what's really cool about an established business. But when you're talking about that much family, there has to be a lot of growth.
Yep.
And a lot of growth or diversification. And so my grandpa's first diversification, he probably did more for himself. He invested in banking. And then in the late 80s, I think it opened in 89, they started in convenience stores. And so that stuff strengthens that. But again, every generation, every time somebody has a kid, you have to come in there and find a way to continue to grow if you want to give them the same opportunities you had.
Yeah, I think generational businesses, whether it ag or otherwise, it's definitely harder on every generation.
Yeah.
Because you think about when you start a business, the generations that started it, they were just trying to survive. They were just trying to make their way. And the pie's pretty small. And you've got, a couple kids and you try to figure out how they can be included in the deal. But as that grows, and it creates a lot of pressure. Did you feel pressure? One, did you feel like when you were in high school and you're thinking about college, did you have the feeling, okay, I want to stay part of this, or do I want to go blaze my own trail? And secondly, did you have a lot of angst about, like, we have a saying around here, the old timers around here, a guy that went to country school with my dad, long gone, but he would always complain about his boys because they were the third generation, and he would stop here and whine to my dad, and he would say, it takes 2 generations to make a fortune and 1 to piss it away, and these boys have it in fucking overdrive. That's what he would say. And so, and I felt that. Like, on the one hand, how do I be a good steward of what is here? But 2, how do I grow this without being the one that everybody in town talks about? How, well, that Whistler kid, boy, he fucked that up. Like, did you feel that?
Well, at that age, I don't think I thought about second and third order consequences of my kids.
Yep.
And my brother's kids and all of that. So at that time, I thought that I was just going to be the next Bob Gotch, and this was going to be a super fun ride. I was aggressive. I wanted to feed cattle. I loved cattle feeding. I loved everything about it. I loved the risk of it. I liked I like driving up to the feedlot. I always joke, the meat grinder versus the feed yard thing.
Yep.
If I were out in a vehicle driving past our place with somebody, I'd be much more proud to show them that, even though I'm not day-to-day involved in there right now, than I am at the plant.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've completely done on my own. So there's a lot of pride in it and a lot of romanticism. And my grandpa always used to joke that there's too much romanticism in the livestock industry, that's why people will do it for free.
Yep.
But no, I had thought that there would be ups and downs, but generally speaking, I will do what my dad did and carry on. And my grandpa was probably wiser to that than I was at the time. I remember him sitting down and telling me, it's just, don't worry about this too much, try and use it as a springboard, try and build something around it, try and do this or that. Well, at the time, before we had, I would say a really long span of very difficult markets. I don't know if anybody would disagree with me that 2015 through, basically 2 years ago or 18 months ago were difficult to navigate markets for cattle. But my thought was just, well, I'll just feed my own cattle and then we'll work for the company and this will all be good. But you start looking around and independently wealthy cattle feeders under the age of 50 are few and far between. Yeah. And I've talked to friends dads about this. I've talked to a lot of people, and I know of a couple, and I'm not going to name them. And I think what they've done is awesome, but it's difficult. Yeah. And so those young people that have truly made it on their own, and done it, good kudos to them. I wasn't one of those who could make it work. There was just too many times you're buying a negative margin, trying to trade your way into the profit. It didn't quite work. And I think we're going to have a lot more opportunity going forward, but we just had a period of time. It took forever for it to fix itself.
Yep.
That slack was a lot longer than anybody dreamt.
Yeah.
And that's why these plants took so long to build, in my opinion, because everybody's like, oh yeah, they're making $500 a head right now, but next month this will right itself.
Yep.
And then we went years before we started to see us go back to normal industry margins for the packing sector. And we started to see profitability in the livestock side. So now, in my opinion, the opportunity is going to be every time this thing backs up, you better be prepared to get involved, but don't buy the highs because the risk is so insane. I mean, you're just high dollar figures for these animals.
Yeah. Did you pivot? You pivoted to the meat. Like that was was your pivot?
I forgot a story. Yeah, essentially, but it was kind of forced. At a certain point there, I couldn't stand the idea, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody. I couldn't stand the idea of getting stuck in that locker, hauling 2 or 3 to the locker model. And so I set out to export. And I thought I put together a dream team. I had a bunch of meetings and presentations and went to companies I had, probably no business talking to, but I just asked the right questions, get in the right meeting.
Yep.
And so we had Warner Global, which I don't even think exists anymore, but it was a spinoff company of Warner Trucking. And so we're there at Warner headquarters, and we've got the owner or pseudo owner of this food company in Shanghai that Warner had a vested interest in a trucking company that had a vested interest in this food company. So I thought, okay, everybody's going to try and do this as this Chinese market opens, but nobody's going to assemble a team like this. I mean, I've got the I've got the bankers. I've got the legal documents. We've got everything set up with XM on the banking side. We've got the logistics covered, and we have a partner that actually owns something there.
Yeah.
And so we started filling up a pipeline of NHTC cattle to hit this. This is my wife and I were engaged to get married, and I believe this is when Trump started getting a little more forceful.
Yep.
and so I was a little worried about it, but I thought these guys, we've been working on this for a long time. We've both put money into this. And they're a serious company. We're a serious company. We'll figure this out.
Yep.
And my thought was at least we could export some of the cheaper cuts. I'll keep back the middle meats, and I get to create my own little Omaha steaks off of that production.
The premium
right?
side.
Yeah. So I had two models that we priced out. One was kind of the emergency, like we'll give this stuff away cheaper if you'll take some volume. And then one where they got the entire animal. So we got these cattle up on feed, 145 days later, whatever it was, they were kind of heavier cattle that we started with because we were trying to move it through pretty fast. And we got them killed in the box, Chinese label, at the cold storage facility, ready for export. Wife and I are at a dance lesson because she wanted me to not look like a fool at her wedding. And so we're doing this ballroom dancing. I've got a Crown Royal in my hand, and I get a phone call from an odd number. I'm like, okay, I got to answer this. I pick up. It was one of the Warner reps from China. And he said, hey, these tariffs, this is going to be a disaster. And we can't do this. We have to reject those. It was like 25 head. It was just below a pot load. And I'd never killed anything more than 2 or 3 at a time.
Right. So to you, it was a much bigger.
Yeah. And because it immediately went from our problem to my problem.
Yep.
And I quickly did the math in my head, and it was like $1,200. And I said, hey, buddy, we've got 1,500 head of livestock on feed for you. If you're going to welch on this thing over $1,200, I'm up shit creek, and I'm sorry, but you're done with my time tonight, and we're probably done with this deal. Hung up and went on to have a very nice, probably frustrated but fun night with my wife.
Yep. You feigned happiness as best you could.
Yeah.
Danced it out.
And then that's where so I kind of missed a step in that original introduction, but that's where we ended up going to that larger scale cut and wrap facility. Said, let's get this in some premium packaging. Let's start working through this.
Yeah.
And
necessity.
Yeah.
Out of necessity, basically.
And so, but as I did that, I kind of fell in love with the idea of doing it that way, because there were so many levers you could pull, and ultimately that's what I want to see happen with our farm and this operation is have this be another lever we can pull. You know?
Yep.
If we ever do get to these crazy wide beef to livestock margins again, we can be the cattle feed yard for custom feeding that says, we've got a processing facility. We can line these things up. We'll work through with the meat traders. And that was the big advantage I saw to doing this as box beef, doing these in bigger kills. Even if your yearly production is the same as hauling a couple to the locker, you now have the ability to trade some meat.
Yeah.
So you've got to hit a certain amount of volume so that you can talk to somebody. And that was one thing, our first big win of opening this facility, we traded 40,000 pounds of trim, and it's like, okay, now we're getting rid of a problem. These heavy cattle make 135 pounds a piece at least of this 50-50 fatty trim. And that's that's too many snack sticks.
Oh, yeah.
I hope someday, and maybe we'll work with Farmer Grade, we can make a snack stick
There you go.
brand that successful.
Yeah.
But right now, that's not the case.
So you just traded it off. So you just put it on the market. Somebody bid on it, took it. That's kind of the gist of it.
It's not on the trim. What you can generally do is go offer it 5 cents a dime below the sheet price. Somebody will pick it off. As long as it's got an E. coli test on it, it's boxed appropriately. And if they've ever done business with that packer before, you're offering them enough incentive to come through and grab it.
So today, are you taking cattle and having them processed and boxed and selling that boxed meat, or is everything that you guys get done off your farm, are you trying to further process it and sell it in one of your channels, or are you processing some?
Yeah,
just
both.
You're doing both. Yeah.
Yep. So we've got some, like we just did 15 head on a really small kill. I was going to try and split a kill with a guy, and it didn't work out timing wise for him. So I did 15 head. We'll do that like a traditional value up everything. Everything gets put in a bag. Everything gets an individual label, and we may even sell it quarters and halves. But mostly what we're doing is it's either going to hit cold storage, hit the freezer, get traded on a meat trade, or it's going to get further processed. Or once in a while we've got a pretty good base. We're in a ag steel community. There's Nucor.
Yeah.
So we'll get a lot of people that'll buy in bulk. So we'll even sell cases, like 50-pound cases of whole muscle cuts, of our own product without running it through our processing facility. So it's kind of take every avenue we can.
Yeah. You got a lot of flexibility there.
Yeah.
Based on so you can kind of, if your demand on your top end, on your total process part, if that demand warrants, you can take as much that way as you want, versus if you have weakness, you have options to get rid of some of that meat if you need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good to have options.
And that's where you say, when you're talking about, custom feeding some cattle, if markets went to crap or whatever, you could offer them the ability to be like, hey, we got a market to put this in a box and give it to people. Like, is that what you're kind of thinking?
It is. And here's the thing, the way I think of it, everybody has the same problem if they've got kids coming back, and women are particularly adept at this. I've told people what you can do is you can trade that meat. I've got a bid for some of it. I'll grind. I'll run into a commercial patty or something. Or we work with some meat traders and we'll get some of that gone, but keep those middle meats, stockpile them, and go in and sell once a year. Go in and do the holiday run.
Yep.
Have a harvest, if you will. Now, you guys are going to be fulfilling all year. I'm going to be fulfilling all year, but we're making this a true blue commitment, right? But they don't have to, as long as they're honest with themselves about how much they want to commit.
Yep.
If you want to just add a salary, it's probably easier to do it all right at the end of the year.
Yep.
Than it is to try and spend on Facebook ads or try and do this fulfillment throughout the year. And one day you've got 50 orders, one day you have 5. And I don't know if your experience is this, but my opinion, it's easier to fill 50 than 5 because you get or 2, you'll get this random order and it's like, I got to rearrange my day to go run and do that. Or I got to have one of the girls that's being really productive and organizing. Now she's got to go ship a couple boxes. Mm-hmm. So I think organizing around that holiday run, you could have a $500,000 business just on holiday stuff. Yep. Omaha Steaks isn't going to notice you're there.
Yeah.
I mean, the market for corporate gifting is so big.
Yeah,
it is.
And more people, everybody's got a phone in their pocket. I always say the power of Amazon isn't that their prices are good or anything, but when you're forgetful like me,
yep.
It's like, okay, I just thought of that. I'm going to get it on order right now.
Yep.
Otherwise, I'm going to forget. It's like other day, prime example. My kids are running around in the cul-de-sac with the neighbor's kids. I'm like, we need some children at play signs. Boom, it's done. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to feel guilty that we didn't do that next Saturday.
Yep.
And so when you've got that kind of consumerism, I think that it's easy to just kind of fall back into, we need to provide these products at a good price, but you gotta make a margin on it.
Yeah.
So I kind of lost my train of thought there. But
No, you're good.
yeah, but
You're doing majority. You're putting it in box and selling on the market, and then you're really holding back a lot of your cuts and marketing hard in Christmas, the holiday season.
That's the model I would suggest. Somebody come in and do. So if you're a rancher that's got some retained ownership on the feed yard, and you have a daughter or son that's mildly interested in this, that's where I'd say you should start.
Gotcha.
And because if you don't commit to doing that year round, you're not going to get yourself into trouble.
Right.
If you just say, hey, we're going to kill 40 head, and if it's not gone on January 15th, we get to have a discussion.
Yeah.
But I bet if you go in and I say, we're going to get rid of your trim, I'm going to buy your inside rounds and grind them. I've got another buyer for a couple of your chucks. And we're just going to try and take this problem from X down to here. So you have a higher degree of stakes in the mix. And then we just go and get that done. And you have a dollar figure you should hit, or a number of boxes you should hit. You go out and start working on it until it's gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
And when you're working on getting, we have one corporate customer that'll ship 150.
Yep.
That's a lot easier than individuals. And a lot of family members will come in, 4 or 5 kids. Like, everybody's got everything, which is where I was going with the Amazon thing. I forgot about that. But everybody's got everything they need. So it becomes really popular just to send them a box of meat.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's where I'd start. Now, I'm not saying you have to stay there forever.
Yeah.
But if I'm looking at what made it more painful for me to start, had we just been a Christmas gift company for 3 or 4 years,
Yep.
we'd had a lot more fun.
You have the advantage of learning a lot without the pain of building all the systems that you need and figuring out how to make that go every week.
Yeah.
Like, you just kind of get the trial by fire, because when you start, you have all those orders and you learn a lot, but you're not having to perfect that every week.
Yeah.
And having that huge fluctuation.
Right.
Yeah. No,
Yes.
that's really good advice.
So it's back to what you said earlier of not having to kill for it. I get what you mean now. If you could spend a lot of your time on marketing and getting rid of this product and being smart about how you get rid of it and distribute it.
Yeah.
Well,
and even with just the further processing floor, I'm super lucky. I hired a really competent guy, and he's been able to manage that pretty well. I kind of just tell him what I need done, and I focus on compliance, finances, and marketing.
Yep.
And I don't think we would have made it very far without that separation of duties, because these are, everybody, especially ag mentality, we want to do everything. We want to have our hands in everything. It would be super difficult to do all of those things.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Because I think that's something that's universal in all the people that we get on this podcast, no matter what they're in. Most people start and they have skills. Like, I have skills, but I'm not good at everything. But you start a business, and it's much like agriculture today. There's all kinds of guys out there that are really good farmers, but if you ask them their biggest pain, they're not an HR director, but today they're an HR director.
Right.
What they really want to do is they really want to get out and run the planter, but they're not. They're the HR director. They're the HR director. They're the OSHA inspector. They're the accountant. They're all these things. So when you started and as you've grown, what's been the hardest like system that you've had to build, or the hardest job that you've had to try to find somebody to offload on, or what have you realized that you thought was a strength of yourself that you realized not near as good at it as what you thought you were?
Yeah, I am better at forecasting some things. You know, we were looking at our pro formas on this, and I had forecasted 2.5 years ago within $35, which some of this is luck, but what our finances would look like for February of this year with the processing facility up and running. What I'm worse at than I ever dreamed of is I completely and fully expect people to understand what I am thinking.
Yeah.
And
I don't think that you're alone on that at all.
Yeah.
I expect everybody understands what I'm thinking, including my wife. And I struggle, I don't like being a boss. I don't. I want to hire people that can be in charge of other people.
You want to be a coach, not a boss.
Coach at best, I want to tell people what needs to be done and then have it happen.
Yeah.
And that's tough. That's tough. It just is. I am not as much of a old school boss, I guess, as you would, as maybe would be best, but there's other strengths and we just run with those. And I hope that, that some of those decisions I made, like to hire my floor manager, Jesse, are paying dividends there. And they have been so far. I mean, he is completely in control of that crew. He's completely in control of that floor. Right when we started in October, it was a little bit chaotic, a little bit too much, time on his end. And I said, we've got to get you more people. You can't burn out, because if I go back there, none of this stuff will happen.
Right.
Going back to, we got to be focused on marketing. We've got to be focusing on all these other things. So if I go back and help you, we're doomed.
Right.
And so I got him more people hired, and so far he's been really effective at managing those people. And, so that was the best decision I made. And other than that, it's managing expectations. My sister works for me. That's a whole another thing when you're working with family. Yep. And she's worked for us this entire time. She's worked alongside me from when we were doing zero, to now where we're at today. And so for years, and even for 2 years prior to this, it was, Jesse, Callie, Blake, one of us is handling it. And now we have to start changing roles. It's like, okay, you do these things, I do these things, you do these things. And that's always tough to get people, out of the old ways and into the new. But as we've started to do that, I feel like she's got a better sense of accomplishment on some things, and I am freed up to, get on the phone and work the network and talk to, we've got, like I said, one of our biggest customers, he and I have ideas for days, and it's important to spend some time developing those.
Yep.
And, he's a really wonderful guy, and we probably spend a couple hours on the phone, a week, or on a Zoom working through those things. Then you add the next customer, then you add the customer you want, then you add the people you keep up with to see if they know anything, kind of the old trader mentality. Like, I got to make my round of phone calls.
Yep.
And all of a sudden I look up and I've been on the phone for 6 hours, and, not a lot of meat getting cut by me.
Right.
But once I kind of accept, and Jesse, to his credit, sat me down in these early days of opening the plant, and he said, do not say you can run back here and help if you do not have time. It's disheartening to your employees. I was like, oh, especially coming from somebody I trust so much, and that I'm trusting with a big portion of my business. I was like, okay, you're right. We've got to fall into our holes here, or fall into our slot and just run with it. And those people that have supported me in that and made that a reality for me, I'm hoping we grow enough that I can reward them with good compensation and opportunity and go from there.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had a guy on here named Jason Mock, and it was a great episode, but he got in the meat business in 2020, and he bought a plant, and sales were doing really well. He was doing some fundraisers, like that side of the business was humming. But all the problems that he had with keeping labor and the USDA and the consolidation of, if a freezer unit goes down, you think it's like, $700, maybe $1,000. Nope, this person charges you $7,000 because they're the only one that can fix it. They're like the deer of the freezer business. Yeah. And that side ended up sinking the business because just the labor. Do you have any problems with keeping labor? And when we talked about that on that episode, we had a bunch of people email us and say, man, I'm a butcher, and there's just less and less people out there that can do it. And the amount of people that say they want to do it and then end up backing out and quitting or saying, I'm done with this, it's tough. And I mean, lockers that we work with Farmer Grade, we see the same thing. So like, are you seeing that? What are some tips? Like what's your perspective on labor?
Yeah. So first and foremost, you mentioned the freezer thing. I had a $10,000 freezer that I bought. Obviously it was used. It was a 15 by 22 retail freezer. I bought it for $10,000. I have 76,000 in it. So I mean, we could have bought a brand new box. Mm-hmm. Essentially was what it was. I think the brand new one was 60 plus install was going to be 14 or 15. So we literally went up to the brand new box. So that is a challenge. And
is that just because within that business there is just no competition? Or is it just, it's specialized enough that the equipment is that's just what it is?
That's a great question. I know right during COVID, the panels and all of the components were really hard to get. Now you can order, I could have some 12-foot insulated, panels for a freezer or cooler here by next week.
Yeah.
I don't really know why that stuff costs so much. But it certainly does. Refrigeration equipment's expensive, and then it's expensive to run. You've got that on top of it. There was a beautiful plant, Omaha Steaks. They keep coming up, but there's a beautiful plant a few miles away from us, and they wanted, in my estimation, next to nothing for it. But it had ammonia refrigeration. You couldn't turn it. You couldn't turn it off. Number one, and there was no retail there. Because the town, and I depend on that to make to take my overhead from something that's kind of insane for me down to manageable. And the reason they closed it was they couldn't get enough people, and they absorbed that steak packaging line into their Omaha location.
Yeah.
As far as our labor, we're right next to a hog plant, a Tyson hog plant there in Madison, and we haven't gotten to the level where we need enough people that we really have trouble with that. Now we did just have to implement a very strict 20-day unexcused absence policy.
Yeah.
Because we knew if we set it at 4, we wouldn't have anybody.
Right. Yeah.
And that is a challenge.
Yeah.
We've got great guys, and they do a very nice job portion cutting. I'm very picky about how things look in the package. And we've got an older gal named Deb who's been wonderful. She kind of runs the packaging side, and everything's good there, but they're certainly not afraid to just not come one day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a challenge. And I think that's pretty normal in the industry.
Yeah.
I think some of these big packing plants measure their turnover in quarters, not years.
Yeah. I'll tell you a quick story. The way people perceive what's important to somebody versus someone else, I feel like when you when you were hiring people, when you have people working for you, it's really easy to have a tendency to think of the way you compensate those people are the way that you would want to be compensated. And like a lot of people think that money is the motivator. Like if I pay this guy more money, if this guy is really good at what he's doing, but I want another level, money's the motivator. And that's just not true for a lot of people. And I'll give you a great example. When I was in the construction business before I started selling, I would fire up hog buildings. When everything was done, before they were ready to start using them, I would go there and I would take care of the checklist, and I would set the controls, and I would make sure everything worked and all that. And I was one guy, and there would always be this bullet list of stuff that the crew left, because when they got down to the end and they had 16 guys there, the foreman, like when only 2 people are left doing anything, he gets real nervous. And so he's like, all right, well, Whistler can finish that. We're out of here. Yeah. What they didn't realize was when one guy walks in and you got to finish the entire plumbing manifold, that's different than when you've got 3 people there that could be working on it. And so then I would get this call of like, why are you going to fire up this one? No, I got 2 days here to finish this because there's this, and this. And so my boss was like, I'm gonna tell this guy that if he doesn't give me a list of everything that needs to be done, and that he sends a guy back so that when you come, all you got to do is set everything and fire it, I'm going to withhold his paycheck. And I told him, I said, I don't think that's going to work. And he goes, why is that? And I said, because I don't think he needs a paycheck. I knew this guy, and he lived in a little house they rented from a farmer that he probably worked off the rent and just helping him in the fall. He didn't have cable TV. He didn't have a cell phone. The only phone he had was his company phone. He had a variety of vehicles that, if one quit running, you just parked it and let it season, and then the next time maybe it would run. And his biggest joy in life was like hunting and fishing and, having a beer here or there. So, but that was the road we went down. And when my boss got to the point that he had like 5 paychecks, which would be the equivalent of, because I think we got paid, no, that was every week. So 5 weeks worth of pay sitting on his desk. And he wasn't getting the reaction that he wanted. He's like, yeah, I guess that's not, because I'm like, he doesn't care. He doesn't actually need the money here. He's probably saving up for something. Anyway, I think that made an impression on me, and I've always held on to that you really have to know when you're trying to manage employees, what you think is important to them may not be. And you got to try to put yourself in that person's shoes. So anyway, that was a little rambling.
What's your ultimate, if you could have this facility humming at your dream scenario, would it be you create Albers craft beef brand so big that you guys could run a large chunk of cattle through there, get into retail stores, having a big demand on the direct-to-consumer side, wholesaling, or still do what you're doing with the hybrid method? Like, do you want to grow this thing into like you're a household name, you're in grocery stores across the nation, or is it like because you're just doing so many different things, and I get why, because you have to almost to run that facility, but like what's your end goal if you could have it go in a certain way?
That's a great question. And to a certain degree, I don't know.
Yeah.
I will say this, our capacity to produce fed cattle and high quality fed cattle is going to outrun this place no matter what I do. I cannot absorb, and that's why I'm always very careful, especially when I get asked questions about, breed claims, hormone claims, how an animal was raised. I'm careful. I don't like the people that will demonize traditional ag, and it's like you've got 2,000 or 3,000 head on feed, and you're posting on Facebook talking about how this is the bad method to sell your 10 locker beef. I mean, I don't like that. So I'm always careful about that. But I will say, I think that my goal would be to have this plant have a base level of contract work, whether that be for a snack stick company or whether that be cut and wrap for a distributor or patties. And then I'd like to have about a dozen families that we work really hard for and work on the value added side. I think that's about the right number, maybe even less. And so I want the facility to stand on its own with contract in the retail. Mm-hmm. And then I want to add families as we can and work on developing those brands with them, work on co-branding. I like a lot of what you guys are doing with Farmer Grade, where it's kind of under one umbrella. I feel very strongly we should have a ground beef brand that is commingled.
Yep.
To help solve a lot of these problems. And it may be a quote unquote loss leader initially, but as we get some traction, we could go more into a premium burger brick or box of patties at a retail locations across the country. And then ultimately, I don't at this point have a desire to own a bigger plant.
Yeah.
Where I think about, where could this go if beyond my wildest dreams? What avenue would that have to take? And I think it's small retail, branded retails, brick and mortars, serviced by this central further processing facility. And that's obviously my personal experience. I know how to run a small, 2,000 square foot retail. I know those numbers, going back to what I said, it would be a successful company if it were sitting in a strip mall or in a small building on its own. And it's replicatable. That's something you could scale. And so we've been developing that idea for a long time. Before we had the plant, I was working with a gentleman who has a big steak brand more on the value side. And we were this close right before COVID to sticking Unit 1 up in Lincoln, Nebraska. Yep. And so that I always revisit, not because I'm super passionate or whatnot about it. I'm super passionate about making our facility work.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm super passionate about working with some fun families that want to figure this out.
Yep.
And if we get that cracked, then next steps would be, are you going to build or buy another plant? No. I want to get single person or 2 employee retails pumping and just put them everywhere, service them with this. Everything's case ready. Everything's ready to go, barcoded. It's all in the system. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a great idea because you talked about Amazon. In almost every small community, well, not even small community, big communities, retail in general has been completely upended by the Amazon model. So in other words, the days of like retail knickknack shops, that's a really hard business because there's a certain amount of people that they will literally walk into a store like that, see something, and then take a picture of it and see what they can buy it at Amazon, because it's easier than having to load it up in the car and haul it home. They'll just have it delivered to their house. And so retail is changing, and it's so much more, I feel like generations today, it's a lot more about experiences and things that you can't just get online. And the idea of meat retail, but also your idea when you first started, where along with that, maybe you have events where you show people how to barbecue, how to cook this steak, and how this T-bone cooks up versus this ribeye, and you get a sample. Like that experience, I feel like that's kind of where retail can work.
I just saw a TikTok the other day of Starbucks roasting houses, and they have them in New York City, London, major cities in the world. And you walk in, and you're greeted by this guy, and he gives you this lowdown. It's literally this woman, POV of her walking into this roast in New York City, this roasting place. And it is literally just a Starbucks hub of, yep, we get this, we'll roast it right here for you, make your own coffee. It's a whole Starbucks brand experience. You walk in, and it's like the best retail experience you could possibly have at Starbucks. And like that, you're right. So you need, that's cool what you're talking about, because I feel like retail's dying, but if you do it a different way and you have that experience, people, it's Instagrammable. It's it's TikTokable.
And retail's dying, so there's available space at you can go in and try one of these. And everything can get rolled back out. You might be in it for $20,000 worth of improvements. But we're not talking about a massive commitment. So I think that's a repeatable item with a central kind of hub to it. And so that's my 10-year, if I look at what could really blow up, that's where we're at.
That's
now,
cool.
Would I be completely happy with getting this plant running, having a snack stick contract, and then all of a sudden I find myself having some time to go back to the feed yard? That would also be a big goal of mine.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we're going to just kind of see where it takes us. Every time I have my own very strict ideas about things, I seem to get shut down.
Smack.
Yeah. I've got a good God story about that. I just moved my family to Norfolk, which was hard for me. I was Wisner, True Blue, and my wife's a dentist there in town, and we're building this plant, and we're on the road all the time. And, we just felt like we had to do it for a minute. And it was a difficult decision. And we moved in, and the high had kind of worn off of like, we got a new house, this is fun. It's like, oh, okay, we made a decision here. This is a decision that we made. And I kind of just shot off a quick prayer, I guess. And it's like, God, just if I'm doing the right thing here, just let me know. And I was driving down the YMCA, walk in, and this old brand inspector who's always there is a big gold tooth. He's always got to show it to you, tell you what the price of gold is, and what he's kind of a gold bug. And he goes, Albers, get over here. I said, okay, yeah, what's up? He goes, I need to take a picture with you. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? He goes, he holds up this 279, which is my processing company, made out of like 1800s barbed wire. He'd made it up. And he put it in front of me. He leaned over to my ear. He goes, don't you worry. God's got a plan. Eat beef. I was like,
wow.
It was like 4 minutes of delay.
Yeah.
Yep.
I was impressed with that.
That is pretty
insane.
good. I
And
wish I could get an answer that quick.
That fueled me for a year.
Yeah.
It really did. And you can believe in that sort of thing or not. But boy, that was incredible for me, because it was a tough decision to say, I'm going to step back or step into this. And I don't know when I'll come out of it, or if I'll come out of it, what that looks like with the farm. Because I couldn't have a foot in both arenas at that time. Now I still try and recruit customers for the feedlot and kind of those kind of things, but I'm not out there every day. Sure. So
does your family, like, man, that's so crazy. Like, your guys' whole dynamic is so cool that you've kept it going, that family farm going. Are they supportive? Do they see the value of what you're doing? Because like we talk about on here all the time, that farming's getting harder. Margins are getting squeezed. Inputs are going up. We got to find a way to stop being a price taker and control our own destiny a little bit. And so, like, the meat thing, what we're doing with Farmer Grade, like, that was a way, and the social media too. It's finding ways to control our own destiny a little bit. And when you were thinking about doing this, was your family like, yeah, man, that like this could be something that could bring value to the operation and sustain it long term? You know, if you like, was that in your mind, or was it always
I thought
like
about it constantly?
Yeah.
Stressed me out a lot.
Yeah.
And the answer is no, but yes now.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I think now that it's come to fruition, we've got immense support.
Mm-hmm.
You know, now we had to see the reality of it. You know, it sat there in the planning phases, and it's like, what's Blake really working on?
Yeah.
There isn't really something tangible there.
Mm-hmm.
There's some losses on a beef company, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what there was to show for all my work, and you know, it's amazing how fast too, as you get involved in other things, you lose that enthusiasm to have the farm talk, to have the market talk, to have these. And so, yeah, it kind of alienates you a little bit. But now that we're up and running, no, I mean, everybody's been super supportive. We're going to do a little, we're going to get a party bus together here in the next 3 weeks whenever we can make it work for everybody. We're going to ship everybody up and do a family tour. And, you know, Britt and I are passionate about making sure everybody knows, like, this is our project, but it's only our project because it had to be somebody's. It had to be our financial responsibility. I don't think it would have worked. And people wouldn't have put the sacrifice in if it was a shared family project. If this was just like an Albers family enterprise item, I don't think we would have got it across the finish line.
Yeah. Somebody had to have the buy-in.
So yeah, I had to have enough skin in the game that it's like,
it's got to work.
Gotta work. It's gotta work. But now that we're there, as we pay down some debt, we should prove this thing works. It's making everybody happy. I want to make sure that, you know, everybody understands there's opportunities that surround this, try and make it come back full circle. And hopefully that doesn't take 10 years. That's where I'm at. It's like, if that takes 2 or 3, I would be ecstatic. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's like the vision for the farm then? Keep growing it, find ways to diversify like you are with other businesses. Like when you look at the future of ag in your guys' situation, what do you think? Where do you think it's going? What do you do?
What do I think is probably somewhat irrelevant for the moment. You know, those guys got their hands full. They're running a big custom feed yard, or big is relative, you know. And what do I think though, if I'm looking at the future for what my brothers and I could work on, as we get into a normal, hopefully a more normal cycle. It's hard to say normal. The cattle market's never normal.
Right.
Yeah.
But I've assembled some of the best cattle traders on the future side. I've got great connections on the beef side. My brother Chase, like I said, is an excellent animal health guy. He's got a really good eye for livestock that I don't. I'm a numbers guy. I'm not as in love with the physical animal. He is. You know, he's a true caretaker, and we've got a great crew. The Mofald boys are kind of in charge of some things. We got a great cowboy crew. We can handle high-risk cattle. We can handle a lot of things. And so my goal would be, like, let's assemble a cattle feeding group that's all-encompassing. We're going to have a futures trading arm, a risk, you know, a separate risk management policy because you have to in cattle.
Yep.
And then really try and specialize in feeding some margin into these cattle. And if the opportunity presents itself, we run some of these cattle all the way through the box.
Yeah.
So that's my dream scenario of pulling this all back together.
Yeah.
You know, but that's a big lift. Right now, I think everybody's just focused on, like, let's keep the feed yard full, operations going well, grow the row crop if the opportunity presents itself, and just manage what's there. You know, it's a lot of work to manage what's there.
We're we're rooting for you because the cattle business is about the only thing left in animal livestock that hasn't gone the vertical integration. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of the, what I heard that the average, you correct, and you may not know this either, but I just heard this morning, like the average cow herd is only like 40 head.
Yeah, it's small.
It's very small. Now the feedlot way is not that way, and there's a brand new feedlot out. Is that in Nebraska?
Black shirt feeders.
Yeah.
Yep, that's a key gym project. And I think that's going to be a lot of dairy cross animals. I'm not totally familiar with it, but that gentleman has had a hell of a life, and that's a cool culmination of a project.
Yeah.
If you get a chance to listen to his he did a podcast. I can't remember who with, but it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And one of the things he talked about, and I'm paraphrasing, and I'm probably going to butcher it because I haven't listened to it in months. But one of the things that I think young people struggle with in livestock, and probably, obviously, row crop, is getting that ball rolling with consecutive years or turns of cattle of profitability. You have to have some consecutive years, especially when cost of living, it doesn't matter how cheap you want to be, it's going to cost you some money to live, right? Yep. But Key Jim had pointed out, he goes, he didn't say essentially I'm a smart guy, but it's kind of like I'm a smart guy.
Yeah.
But I had in Western Canada, it was the perfect timing. He had nearly 20 years of uninterrupted, at least moderate success, compounding. And that was what catapulted him into where he's at now. So that's the unfortunate thing we have to accept in ag is sometimes a great deal of your success is just what year you were born. And that's tough.
That's true too. That's 100% true.
To accept that.
You look at the grain farming, and if you were somebody that got started at the right time, you built tremendous equity.
Yeah.
But if you were unlucky enough to be one of these people, younger than me but older than you, that started at what I think people will look back as like the golden age of grain farming, where we hit higher highs every year, and yet we had no interest, to where you could just, so many guys that started then or came back to the farm and took over, like they'll never see success. I shouldn't say that. I should be an optimist. But the chances of them having as many consecutive years of everything playing right, to where your operating cost you almost nothing and your returns increased or stayed good for a big chunk of time. I mean, those guys are all standing around now going, gosh, I remember the good old days, and it's a cyclical business. One thing I wanted to ask you about, I'll say this. What I think is so great about the meat business is, and we're amateurs at it, and I'm more of an amateur than him because I just get to show up and be like, oh, this is cool. Got any meat sticks I can have? Is just the size of it, that there really is room for a lot of people in it, because you think that you're like moving a lot of meat, or you, and
it's nothing.
It's nothing. Yeah. But to that point, a lot of talk has been about the consolidation in the packer side of the cattle business. And obviously it went that way in the hog business.
And poultry.
Well, yeah, and poultry's been gone for a long time. Is there a lot of fear out there as a feeder? Is there fear out there that it's going to consolidate further? Is there any optimism that there's a chance of getting it any less consolidated?
Well, I think we're seeing a little bit of that. You've got some new plants coming online. It's going to be a tough time for them to come online. So if they survive the first year, they'll be there for good. You got a lot of investments in the industry because people saw that there is margin. Where I think the opportunity lies is, like you said, you can get, oh yeah, we moved some meat. It is literally zero. And I used to really guard myself. You know, I came from the commodity trading zero sum game kind of ideology. And I wouldn't talk about what we were doing, who I co-packed with, how we did this, because I was like, oh, you know, I don't want anybody to get in on this. Now, number one, I'm like, I'm not sure you have
the balls to get through this.
To do this.
Weather
so
the
I'm not as
storms.
worried about you stealing the playbook. And number two, it just doesn't matter. You could have, you know, the average consumer is what, 59 pounds of red meat? They're eating what percentage of that at home? I don't actually know. But I would guess it's less than half for some people.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the red meat they're eating is literally hamburger at the drive-thru.
Yep.
And so when you look at it like that, you've got a lot of people that don't need to buy a lot of meat, which is actually an advantage for a farm or a ranch to table. Because if people, and they're doing this on the coast, the people in the Midwest all think they're meat traders. I mean, it's unbelievable. And that's why we've had to actually, we do offer a value line for those people. And they are great. They come in, they spend the most money per pop, but they're the lowest dollar per pound. But on the coast, people are realizing that, oh, I can feed my family the better stuff. And it's not actually that impactful, because how much do we really eat at home? And, you know, the people that have the income to do that don't generally have 6 or 7 kids. It's a family of 4. We're eating 20 pounds each at home, you know, a year. So I can go buy a couple boxes of meat and fulfill that. And I don't even notice it, right?
And I can feel good about where it came from.
Exactly. So that's the opportunity, I think. And then, you know, the other portion is you can have facilities like this pop up everywhere and still not be making a dent. And that is just the one thing you have to that you obviously have gotten your head around, and I've gotten my head around, is just the insane size of it all. And that's always the problem with the cattle industry, is we always think it's small enough to get your head around it and get an idea of how these markets should work.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you realize, you know, there's a whole mechanism here of distributors and the food service and, you know, these packing plants. And it's a naval warship, and we're over here in a canoe.
Inflatable.
Yeah. So and that's been one thing that's interesting, is this is kind of off topic, but in the time that I've been around, I've seen a big change in the aging and the stickiness of these food service distributors to hang on to boxes or to go into a suspended fresh or into frozen programs. You know, right when I started this, or probably before, I was just on tours, I think, went to a packing plant, which this is still common. They've got 2.5 days worth of kill, maybe. Yeah. And they're turning those boxes out. Then I went to a large food distributor in Lincoln. I said, how often do you turn this meat cooler? And the gal's like 3-4 days. So those distributors used to get the food service people their meat as green as it was at the grocery store.
Yeah.
And what's happened is those guys said, hey, let's stop panicking. Let's stop selling this stuff down. So that's added a layer of stickiness to the beef price, because they've realized we don't even think about putting it into the freezer till it's at 60 days. So why are we going to lose money on this?
Yeah.
We paid 12 and a quarter. We're going to get 13 and a quarter. I don't care how. We'll get 13 and a quarter frozen next summer. You know, they don't care. And it actually is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because it makes our industry, here's the way I look at it. The meat industry always has margin in it if you can get over the operational humps.
Yep.
If you can get over the overhead, if you can get through the tunnel, if you will, you will have margin versus true blue commodity, even though beef is commodity. But, we're always buying cattle at a cash to cash loss on paper the day we buy them. Row crop, it's you don't know.
Yep.
And so when you enter the meat business, you accept I'm going to have overhead I didn't dream of. But if I get past that, I'm running a boring old company with a set percentage margin.
Yep.
That was one thing my father-in-law kind of taught me is they have office supplies. You can't get more boring than selling paper and copiers.
Yep.
Yeah.
But he made it fun. I mean, he's having a blast doing it because it's running a business that has a set margin. And if we sell more, we make more. And that's just how it works.
Yeah.
Whereas we're not used to that as on the ag side. We'd sell more and lose more.
That's exactly right. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I like about the meat business is it's a product that people need. It's a need for most people. It's a freaking need. And, you can diversify. You can do a lot. You can distribute it a lot of ways and not have to change your core product. And that I like that because it's complicated. It's complicated, like you said, all the logistic problems and the back end and operations and all that. But the product is simple. It's meat, and people need it.
Yeah,
and that's
and it's just a value add, and it takes time to learn how to capture that.
Yeah.
And, especially on the beef side, I feel like, a lot of people price themselves kind of too low. And then they're spinning their wheels. They're like, where's this value add we were looking for? Now, the hog side, I don't know a lot about your costs on processing a hog, but I would imagine the advantage to the hog is you're going to have a lot less wrapped up in inventory. You can ramp up very quickly, and you're going to be less anchored to that core cost of goods sold. So I think the pork thing's really interesting. I think you guys have got a lot of opportunity there for sure.
The thing I like about a pig is because that's all I knew. And when we started doing cattle, I was like, you get 75% of a pig. Like that pig weighs 320. Most of that pig's coming back at meat. When the first group of cattle that he got done, he's like, oh, we're going to get this much. And I was just like, what? Where the hell is what? Where's the rest of it? I'm like,
I remember looking up.
I was just like, that's terrible. I'm like, how can you make any money?
Yeah.
A hog is very efficient and it's quick. It grows quick. You
do it twice a year, get two groups. Yeah. I was going to ask you, how do you price out, like how do the big boys price out their products? Because I know that they don't look at ground beef the same way that they don't value ground beef the same way they value a ribeye, right? But like in our situation, I'm trying to sell this product and cost of ground beef. We take our total cost of the carcass and the process and all that, and then, however many pounds of ground beef we got, and we got this many pounds of ribeyes. Well, the same pound of that beef isn't the same, right? Because we know this steak is a lot more the value. The steak is a lot higher than the ground beef, and I know like the big boys, they pretty much are like, we don't need to make shit on the ground beef. So like, what's the best way to value a carcass? Are they looking at a carcass and going, we just want to extract this many dollars out of this carcass. We don't care if we sell the ground beef at this margin because we know we're going to make it up here on this stuff.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different models. There's the sell it as a balanced animal, but to do that with volume, you have to double your cost of goods sold and spend it all on marketing and Facebook ads.
Yeah,
and that works. And you find a good customer and they're willing to pay it, more power to them. Then there's liquidate parts of the animal back into what your break even is and figure out what the market will bear. That's kind of our mixed model that we're doing right now. And what I like to do is I'll call up a meat sheet from a food service company. And I do enough business I buy some pork to grind, whatever. So they'll give me their prices. And you go prime delivered to your facility, plus the cost of portioning it, plus your yield loss. That's going to equal what you should at least be considering your break even on your middle meats. I don't care how you want to look at the rest of the animal. If you had to go out and replace a high quality piece of meat into a package and ship it out, that should at minimum be your cost of goods. So that level peak in December on a high-end prime grade ribeye with the processing fee on it, with a small yield loss, you might get some steak tips, but we're not going to count that. There's a really good meat trader out on the West Coast, Steve, and he told me one time, Blake, he goes, do not ever count any byproduct as a part of the price. Because if you get money out of it later, that's great. So I've really lived by that. But that cost got up to $29 was your cost in December on a prime grade ribeye. And so you just can't afford to do that. Same thing goes we just went line item by line item through a 1,650 pound carcass Wagyu animal. Okay. We priced it off of full value off of Snake River Farms. I think they have gold or black, the lower grade one, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think it's black is their lower
and
one.
That animal would provide basically $7,000 worth of gross margin that could be used for shipping, marketing, costs of doing business, storage on the frozen product. And I like to tell people, if AgriBeef, this monster, and Snake River Farms, they've got to be the largest Wagyu producer in the country. If they're priced here, and this is what they think they need to be at to move this product online, then, who are you to think you can do it cheaper?
Right. Yeah, right.
And now there's a degree of that. It's like, yeah, they earned that right to charge that.
Right.
And that is true.
But they also have the efficiency because they're one of the biggest of the smalls.
Yep. And so what you can do is say, hey, we have to price here to get our online to work. Mm-hmm. If we can't move it all, we have a price B that we move locally where we don't have these costs involved. Yep. And that's always been a struggle and a solution, is that we have to have 2 price points.
Yeah.
We have to have the one that includes marketing this product. And it includes the shipping and the coolers and the logistics of it all. And I think that, that's the hardest thing to get people's head around as they enter the meat business. Number one is the yield loss on the cattle. That's for certain. Number two, this animal will produce 75 pounds portioned of strips, ribeyes, and tenderloin.
Yep.
That's it. Yeah, 1,500 pound animal there. You got 8 cases of 10 pound beef. I mean, that's your. So how much pressure do you want to put on the middle meats? That's up to you. But generally, you have to put a lot of pressure on the middle meats.
Yeah, you do. Absolutely.
I mean, and one thing the other little cheat, I guess I've told people along with the holiday box thing, is if you can go into this developing a small, even a couple 100 pounds a week, into a commercial patty and just sell it for what you've got. Just say, hey, I don't know what your distributor's charging, but we'll try and get there. We're going to have to be higher, but we'll try and get there. That will help pick that throughput up. That helped us tremendously.
Yeah.
We had 500 pounds a week of ground beef into patties. Doesn't sound like anything, but that got us through a long time to now where we can develop the business, where we've got a big thing, which again, ag mentality, switching gears from production ag into this is really tough because the numbers get really small.
Yeah.
It's like, why am I messing with this? What am I doing? You've got you have to get excited about like $2,000 a day. That's fantastic. That's really good. Versus you've got guys that are used to $100,000 transactions coming and going. All of a sudden you're just grinding away at this, and it's a mentality thing that was tough for me to switch. So I'm not saying it's tough for other people. It was tough for me to switch on to that and be like, no, we're killing it.
Yeah.
This is good. We're getting along here. So.
Yeah. No.
How important in your business has been your brand? Do you feel like that is, how instrumental do you think that is in being able to grow your business, having that brand to differentiate yourself from other people?
Like, I was listening to a podcast, it's called My First Million, and they had a guy on there. They were shooting off ideas, and one of them, and they're all from LA, so, they're tech guys, right? And they got in talking about meat and how, man, somebody needs to come out and make this revolutionary butcher shop and make it this whole vibe that city people like us would just like love and all this stuff. But then they talked about, they don't buy grocery store meat, but if they're going to buy it, they buy Snake River because it sounds like a legitimate farm. When they go in there, they're like, I was looking around the shelves and I see Snake River, and I was like, oh, that like sounds like a legit place. I'm going to buy that. And it's like, you go into a Walmart or a Hy-Vee or whatever your grocery store is, and you're like, how many brands in here actually are doing any type of brand work at all? Like, and I know why, because they're owned by the packer. Most of them are owned by packers. But the brand play, there's no branding, there's no marketing. It's like, I just feel like there's this huge gap in meat where they haven't came to the plate and really got on social media and like hit the ball hard and really tried to build a brand that means something.
The demand is so good, they do not have to.
Yeah.
And that is right. I mean, I know companies that move 1 million pounds a week, and they have sales teams of like 10 or 11.
Yeah.
At that point, you are a logistics coordinator and an order taker. And so it's tough and it's interesting, but the demand for high quality beef is there. Number one. Number two, I'll touch on that branding issue with them being able to, we can laser or print or at chain, or not chain speed, but at a fast speed. Any brand, they could have every single box come out of that plant if they wanted to have a different brand on it that could sound like your farm. Mm-hmm. And that is a challenge. The USDA really wants to regulate, or they don't really want it. They do regulate breed claims so heavily. They do regulate some of these things that these trade organizations have came online. And then of course you've got ingredients, which we have to because allergens and whatnot. I really think that they ought to, and I'm not usually for more government regulation, but they ought to think about, hey, if we're going to call this farms or ranch, or it actually has to have some tangible tie to a farm or ranch.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And that's why I think that the genius is in your farmer grade thing is it's right there. It's like, there's no question. Like Albers Craft Meats, that could have been, after John Albers, the senior VP,
since 1895.
Right, yeah. Exactly. We just pick a number. Like
we found this tombstone in the cemetery, and sounds good.
And so that craft labeling is super easy for them to replicate, and that's a bit of a challenge. And then what was your original question?
No, my original question was just whether you thought that. Whether there was value in your brand, like your family farm, and do you feel like you've been able to leverage that to where it's an asset, or do you think that I guess your level of importance in what you think that is?
So just starting, I would say it has just started to become more and more important, because we had some e-commerce success that I discussed earlier in the podcast, but it was a kind of blanket company. We were marketing several different products, and then Albers was just one of them.
Okay.
And now we're starting to see that more premium buyer that it's like, okay, this is the Albers stuff, right? Like, I don't want this product or that product. I want the stuff that's from you guys directly, that you had something to do with the entirety of the production process.
Right.
So just starting. On a personal level, though, and I wouldn't consider anything that I've done, especially, in the past, as personal branding.
Yeah.
But I put myself out there as a person who does this long enough. That's been really helpful. I've gotten a lot of people, have come to me, my two biggest processing customers, because somebody told me, oh, he handles this, and now we're getting to the point where I've got new leads as they're seeing me bring on these other customers and kind of be full service turnkey for them. Yep. So from a personal level, that started working about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. But on a just steak branding, a branded box, I wouldn't say it was hugely important until recently. It was more like my sister Callie. She's great with people. So she'll sell person to person, and the retail or the corporate stuff, she does really great with that. And so it was almost more like Callie's important.
Yeah.
Not like the Albers family brand. It's like Callie's important.
The personal relationship.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I think the meat business is similar to what we talked about. I don't know whether we got this on. We were talking about just this, like what we're doing with the podcast, consistency. Yeah. If you are good enough that you can last, if you can outlast some people to where you're actually in business, people will start giving you a little more credit.
Yeah. Well, and just purely being there, whether it's online or in person, we've been a meat retailer in Norfolk since 2018. Yeah. And still people are like, where'd you guys come from? Out of left field. Like,
10-year overnight success.
Yeah, exactly.
I heard at a Nebraska beef symposium before I ever thought I was going to be in the beef business. I just thought I was going to be in the livestock business. A guy came up there and said a success or a branded product success in the beef industry is 15 years. That's an overnight success.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, as a person who's now, whatever, I'm into this 9 years, I'm like, I've got a few years left.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. 100%. Rule. So touching on that, just the people coming to your retail side and they're like, man, where have you guys been? Do you feel like, what's your stance on rural America? I don't know. I wrote this question down, and it was, you're out here building this business, supporting small town Nebraska. Are rural communities like yours actually thriving with you guys leading the charge, or do you still feel like they're just hanging on by a thread? Because, rural towns, like our town, thrives on pork production. Yep. If we didn't have pork production, there would be no Ace Hardware. There would be no Hog Slat. There would be no Bazooka. There would be no...
Well, there wouldn't be anything. I get kind of snarky on this because people like to fancy us as part of the economic corridor, because Iowa City is the University of Iowa, and then Cedar Rapids is just north of it. And there's nothing sexy about production agriculture. So like the economic development people, they want to talk about, the library or somebody that's got 3 people making a widget or something that's what makes our little town thrive. No, what makes our town thrive is there's more hog buildings in a 50-mile radius than almost anywhere else in the world, basically. And we're damn lucky to have all those people paying property taxes and paying people and buying the equipment to haul the manure and buying the semis and buying the fuel and all that. And if it wasn't for production agriculture, our little town would be in big trouble. And I feel if you're not lucky enough, you only have to drive a short distance in either direction to counties that don't have like some kind of base of animal agriculture, and they're in bad shape. They're hurting.
Yeah, animal agriculture pumps up those receipts.
Yeah.
It really does. And the reason Wisner is a cattle feeding community is Louis Dinklage was feeding cattle back when they needed more labor, more help. You know, there wasn't automation that we have now. And he would recruit these families to, you know, custom feed for him. And so we have the residual effects from that, you know, a long time afterwards. And Wisner is a great community, and it's really, they've invested a ton of money. The school's wonderful. There's new housing development going up. Everything's going really well. And that was why it's hard to leave. But in then Norfolk, where we're at now, we're about, I would say 25 minutes from the farm, 28 maybe. And they're investing in the community, and it's going really well. So we've seen some good rural success. And I do get a little snarky the other way. In our Norfolk community, we have some people that just don't want to see anything change.
Oh yeah, 10-4.
Don't want to see anything change. No money spent, no nothing. You know, I want you to be careful with my property tax, they say, as it's like, not to be harsh, but you're not paying that much property tax.
Yeah.
And I tell these guys, the reason Britt and I have invested, we have two businesses. She works a dental job, and we brought our kids here, is because you invested in your community. And right now, those dollars would add up to a pretty significant thing. And then we've got 15 employees.
Yeah.
So making communities attractive, I'm pro that, but the jobs have to be there first.
Yeah, that's right. You do.
You have to have the jobs. Then you have to have an attractive community. And that's more just for the fringe people, right? Like, I was a fringe. It's like, okay, you shave an hour of time off of both of our days. We get a decent house at a decent price, and it's a really nice community. Things are easy. Okay, well, instead of me driving to Norfolk every day, I'll drive to Wisner a few days a week. That's so it attracted a fringe, you know, in person, but I still think that's important.
No, it is.
Having pride in your communities. And that's one thing that drives me nuts. And this is pro small communities. I've been a part of the Norfolk community, which is 27,000, whatever. I'd have to look it up. And then a part of Wisner. The amount of people that lead those communities, it's the same amount of people. Mm-hmm. It's the same amount of people that are going out to eat on the social settings too. Yep. It's the same amount of people that it's wild. It's wild to me. You know, the people that push on the fundraisers, the people that organize things for the community, it's the same size, no matter the size of the community.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, I would have thought, you know, there'd been, if we've got 100 people, that's 10% of the population in Wisner that are really pushing on helping organize events and whatever. And we've got more than that, honestly, because, I mean, when they do Thunder by the River, they've got tons of volunteers.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, probably 25% of the community's there.
Yep.
Not in attendance, working it, you know, whatever. And maybe that's too high, but, and then in Norfolk, it's like the same 100 people.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting.
Shakers and movers, man. I mean,
I will tell you, one of the neatest towns I've ever been to is in Nebraska. We went out to Broken Bow. There's a guy out there that has probably the highest, most productive sow farm in the United States, and PIC. He has PIC genetics, and they bring people in there to see how they do stuff. And it's Broken Bow. And Broken Bow is, to me, it's one of them towns that just luck of the draw. They never let Like, I don't know if there's a Dollar General there. I don't think there is. And I'm not even sure if there's a Walmart there. And I think that's by design. And I think they're just far enough away from any bigger city, that everything that people need is right there. And so they really support that, because driving through that town and spending time there, you're like, wow, they got this, and it's all mom and pop. It's not like chains. It's all mom and pop stuff for the most part. And you're just like, this is really cool. But that doesn't happen very many places in America.
The Hermit Kingdom model in the middle of Nebraska.
Yeah, it kind of is. It's just, it's pretty neat. So
yeah, Western Nebraska is awesome. We go out to Long Pine if you ever get a chance.
Okay.
It's a blast of a little town. So
I feel like we've talked a lot about the meat, so we should probably talk in farming, but we should get a little personal. Are you doing the carnivore diet?
I did it.
You did it. What's your experience with that?
So I got to a very fluffy 235 at one point, and I was just like, and we're guys, right? So a pair of jeans has a 40-pound span.
Yeah, you're like, going to wear them no matter what.
Right? It's just going to look better or worse.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, you're not redoing the wardrobe. And I was like, gosh, I'm going to have to buy some new jeans. This is terrible. And I'd been following Sean Baker since when I started following Sean Baker, I had more followers than him, which is wild.
That's crazy.
And so I'd been following him, and I tried to start it like 5 times. And for some reason, I started it, and I got a cold or something, and it made it easier to get through those first 10 days, because the first 10 days are hard. Just kind of, you don't want to feel restricted. Yeah. It's not really that hard. You feel better already. I mean, for me, I got like a tiny bit of pain in my hand joints as I transitioned on to, no carbs. And then I felt better.
Yeah.
And so I lost 50 pounds on that pretty lickety split, 55, somewhere around there. And then a bunch of people in Wisner were doing it. So, everybody's like, this is easy. We love beef,
Yeah.
And it worked really great. And then I went on a continuing ed, went to a continuing ed course in Seattle with my wife for her. And they just didn't have good beef. And I was like, oh, I've been strict for a year. We'll eat the food of the people here. Right?
Yeah.
So I kept trying to order just a hamburger, and it was like grass fed, and I don't particularly care for grass fed.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't chow down on it. So kind of fell off the wagon a little bit. And I'd gotten to the point where I was like, I wasn't working out. I was just doing the diet. And I didn't fully, you take the slab of fat off, I guess.
Yeah.
It was like, I'm not as happy with what's underneath it as I thought.
Yeah.
So I started working out with a guy at the Y, a trainer there. Still kind of haphazard. Trickled into some carbs more and more because I was, I kind of sullied my 12 years or 12-month span, and put a little bit of the weight back on. And then now I'm very cautious. I know what things make me feel like crap. I know what things fire off a little lower back pain.
Yeah.
I know what things don't work for me. And that carnivore thing's always there to lean on if you need to shed some weight. So I had great success with it. I tell people it's good for everyone to do for 6 months. Just metabolic reset, find out what was bothering you, because that was the thing. It's like, I just accepted that, well, I'm tight because I'm stressed and it's cattle markets and, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, a lot of it was just inflammation. And so it's been a great tool. Now it's a tool. It was a lifestyle. Now it's a tool.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what would work best for most people. Is like, you've got to go all in for a minute, but once you figure out, how to maintain, because you have a mental picture of how you felt. you know what that baseline of health is once you're on carnivore. Now it's easier to figure out how to get back to it. It's like, okay, I screwed up last weekend. We're gonna eliminate some carbs. We're gonna not overindulge on beer, and we're gonna be a little more careful this week. Okay, we feel better now. And so if I had never done it, I wouldn't have known what that baseline was. And now I know if I'm deviating from that baseline, how to get back.
Yeah.
So it's great just discipline, because anybody that tracks calories, it sucks. I do it now, but before I was incapable. I did not have the discipline for that. So you get a reward because you feel like you've been disciplined when you aren't eating the carbs. Mm-hmm. So that's your mental reward. But in reality, it's easy because you don't have to count calories. You're constantly satiated. It's like, oh yeah, eat 2 pounds of ground beef a day and you
feel full.
Yeah.
You're full all the time. Yeah.
So I think it's amazing. And I think Sean Baker's done a lot for the industry and for demand.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing, we're 5 or 6 pounds per person off the low from a few years ago on per capita consumption. I would contribute a lot of that to keto carnivore.
Yeah, big time. I think, lot of it. Well, you had that movement of, red meat is bad. I mean, don't eat a lot of red meat. And now people are like, I'm going to eat red meat all the time, Fat's not bad. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you've seen this shift now. Steak and Shake kind of started that.
Animal
They're going back to
beef tallow.
Frying in beef tallow. And I did not know this. Buffalo Wild Wings, they fry their stuff in beef tallow. However, it's
shitty beef tallow.
Beef tallow. It's
preserved
beef tallow. But there are more and more restaurants that are coming around to that.
Yeah. Is that a opportunity that excites you with what you're doing?
It does.
Tallow animal fats?
It does. We are going to probably this week invest in a little bit of equipment, limited runs. It's not going to be huge initially. But the way we're packaging it, we're going to cater to people that want to fry in it.
Yes.
Searing tallow is awesome, and we're going to do some of that as well. The little jar you keep to toss a spoonful in the pan. But we've carried a third-party tallow in the store just to test the market, and everybody that walks through my door that wants tallow, it's because they're frying.
Yep.
And they're either like, we're going to have some really good home-style fries, or they're carnivore, and that's how they're doing their chicken wings. They're like, we're doing like a real low-carb or zero-carb fried chicken wing.
So they want like a bucket.
They want like a bucket.
Yep.
Boy, my face would look good on a bucket of.
I think mine would look better.
Thumbs up, like caricature. Yeah.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's something that excites me too. I see it. You just start seeing this trend of it happening more and more, and it's cool to see. And I think
it's a shelf stable thing.
Yeah,
which we like.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. The whole idea that Cheerios are better for you than
than a
ribeye is, I think that's kind of that's going away. I think people are waking up.
Yeah, and even my dad, he mentioned that to me a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago. He goes, boy, my generation was sure sold a bill of goods, weren't they?
Trish and I just had this conversation about like our childhoods, because that generation, they had grown up where everything was cooked at home. Like, you very rarely went out and had a meal out on the town. But then I think like my mom and Trisha's, my mother-in-law too, I think that generation of women, like, they were tired. They were tired. And it was right at this when processed food was just starting. So there was just all these opportunities it was easier.
Yeah.
And like, I remember having TV dinners, and it was kind of like a treat. We had the TV stands, and on Sunday night, now this, you got to remember, my dad was a lot older than I was, but like watching Lawrence Welk and eating a TV dinner and we thought it was kind of cool. Nobody gave any thought about,
What's in this
all
shit?
the stuff that was in there. And so it just started, and it was out of convenience. And then all these food companies was also cheaper. It was cheaper. It was faster. And then it made everything shelf stable. And there was all these advantages, and we were able to, there was no research done, I don't think. Very poor research. And it's taken this long for all those chickens to come home to roost, and people are going, oh, shit.
Yeah.
So now I think the pendulum is finally starting to swing back the other way, which is good.
Absolutely. And I was born in 1990, so I caught the tail end of the TV dinners. And I remember thinking as a kid, like, oh, this is so fun, but they were bad.
Oh, terrible.
They were really bad.
Then you wondered why you're like just drinking a glass of water and then waking up in the morning and be like,
Hot, sticky,
why am I so thirsty?
cardboard brownie in the corner? Like,
Oh, man.
Well, in the pop, like even pop consumption is like, all these new brands that are healthier pops, Olipop,
Yeah.
It's like, geez, we used to drink a 32 ounce Sprite, no problem.
We would literally, we had a Pepsi distribution, Pepsi warehouse in our town. And my mom, we would go to the grocery store, and then on the way home, we would stop at the Pepsi thing, and we would get a wooden crate that had three or four 8-pack bottles, Mountain Dew, Pepsi, and 7-Up, and bring them home, put them in the fridge. And on Saturday morning, I can remember on Saturday morning getting a giant bowl of cereal and a bottle of Mountain Dew and sitting down and watching the Super Friends. And my parents never said anything about it. Like today, you would, no mother
that's
thinks
like
that's
child
a good,
abuse.
Yeah, well, they probably would. But I was also the youngest,
Yeah.
My parents were tired by the time I came by. My mom was probably just like, whatever. He ain't going to make it. I've seen him. He ain't going to make it very far anyway. So
That explains a lot now.
That's probably
why you are the way you are right now.
It is. It's been a tough.
You're kind of a squirrel. Got
Yeah.
that squirrel brain. So that sugar overload just sent you down a path.
I definitely fit the bill because anyway.
Okay, we'll keep going. We're pushing our limit here on time. So let's try to go through these semi quick. You're juggling a meat empire, family, fitness, getting back to the farm as much as you can. How do you balance it all? What is your stance on balance, and how do you, because this is something that I think every entrepreneur struggles with. You got to drive results, and that to-do list is making you anxious, but you got to be present. How do you deal with that?
Well, it goes back to hiring the right person. Number one, I absolutely couldn't do it if it weren't for Callie and Jesse. And then it's my wife. She forces the issue. I mean, she absolutely forces the issue. She's a big girl. She's got a real job. She brings home real income, and she expects that we do things together and that we do some trips together. And she floated the meat business with her tooth money for a while, so she's got some say.
Yeah. Yeah.
I finally told her last year, I said, all right, babe, you can stop holding that over my head. I think I'm more important now.
Yeah.
But it took a while. And no, it's purely, as much as probably both of my brothers would think they disagree with this statement, so, and I'm sure they'll listen to this, but I still have that kind of ag mentality. Like I just get sick thinking about I need to get this done. I need to go work on this. If things didn't go as well as I wanted them to, my natural inclination is to want to go down to the office. And even if I'm not doing anything, it's almost like putting myself in a corner. So when those thoughts happen, you just don't.
Yeah.
And my wife will tell me that. She's like, anytime you have something that really needs done, just let me know. We'll work it out. I'll deal with the kids. I'll do all that. But don't go down there just to stare at a screen and get 20% of what you thought you would get done.
Yeah.
Or go down there and sweep floors that have been already swept just because you're trying to, put that time into it. Now I look at it, my wife and I get up at 5:30. The kids, we did an au pair, which is a whole nother story. It's a great program if anybody's interested. We have an au pair. She starts at 5:45. And at that point, I'm free to either go to pre-op, which I haven't had to do in a while, or we go do a morning workout, have a coffee, gather ourselves for the day. 7:30, off to work. And then, removing myself from the situation too. Like, my employees might think I'm gone a lot. I will literally go drive around and make the phone calls I need to make. Just remove myself from the situation. If I've got something I really need to focus on, I am driving around or I'm on a walk, I'm on that phone call. And after that, the USDA kind of helps too, because you're set hours. So it's like, well, we can't do anything after 3:30. So,
yeah. Right.
So, and it's been a progression. I mean, we're really happy with where things are at now, but it's expectations of people around me. I don't know. I don't think that I've struck some perfect balance. But yeah, just letting my wife be the driver on that and accepting that and getting up early and accepting that you can toggle that 2 hours in the morning, either towards work or towards the fitness or towards just getting our head straight and getting ready for the day. That's been huge.
Yeah.
So that's been huge.
What about flying? How did you get involved with flying and tell the story of that?
I wanted to fly out here. I
didn't
because I didn't want to be thinking about flying home when I was talking to you guys, which is what I would have been thinking about. What altitude am I going to go? Is it windy in Norfolk? Is it, what am I going to do here? But I got into it. My grandpa was into it. He flew 26 or 700 hours before he kind of started bringing a pilot along with him. So he had probably lifetime private aviation, like 3,500 hours. But at the end, he didn't fly that much. I sat back and realized I had inherited this passion from my grandpa. And I think we just talked about it most of the time. We didn't really fly a lot together. He lost his medical when he got cancer for a short stint. Thank God he was fine for a while. And then right when I got it back into flying my own airplane, he died. So I didn't really get to do a lot with him. But I got it right when I started flying before I could drive, got my solo as soon as I could, got my pilot's license at 18, and been flying ever since.
That's awesome. That's really cool. How often do you go fly? Like,
it's sporadic. So I'll fly a lot in a pocket of time and then not much. So the airplane has an annual. So an annual inspection is a pretty big deal, especially on these twin engine airplanes. And that took about 6 weeks. And then we rolled into holiday season and whatnot. So I haven't flown. I've only flown twice since November, but then I've got a bunch of trips lined up that I'll really rack up some hours this spring. And what I do is when I'm not proficient, when I'm not flying every day, every week, I just bring a safety pilot with me.
Yeah.
So that's been a lot of fun. We keep the airplane moving, which is important with that too. The airplane moving is just as important as pilot proficiency. So I've got another guy that's checked out on it, and they still use the heck out of it. So
cool. What do you like? What trips do you use it for? When you go on vacation, do you use it? If it's going to be in the States, is it like for business?
Yeah,
like,
both.
Both. Okay. Cool.
Nothing is more satisfying than flying your kids and your wife somewhere. Like, that is the coolest feeling.
Yeah.
It's also the most anxiety driven. You're like, holy crap, I'm in charge of these people in this aircraft. And, but that is a total blast. And you get down on the ground and you walk out and you look back and you're like, okay, I've done something with my life. Right?
Yeah.
So that's really cool. And then we use it to go out to, there's a couple different airplanes we use, but we'll use it for business, go out to cattle sales. And then I intend on lining up a bunch of trips to kind of go on a mission to recruit a few more really solid people.
Cool.
For the processing company. So that's kind of my next trips that are lined up. I've got one personal and then kind of a tour lined up that we're going to go get some aviation in. So
Sweet. Where's like the best trip? What's the best trip you ever been on, or places that you've been that you recommend to anybody?
To fly yourself?
I just mean travel.
Travel?
Yeah, travel.
Man, that is tough. I'm kind of a beach guy. I get a lot of crap on Twitter about it, but I like a good beach and a cocktail.
Yeah.
I do want to take my wife to Italy at some point. I want to go to Rome. I went there with my grandparents, and I really enjoyed that, the history. But Florida is great. I like Florida. And my wife and I got engaged in Mexico. We go back there once in a while. We had St. Lucia was amazing. We did that for our honeymoon, but economically, it dwindles out of the picture for me right now.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, is it really?
Is it
four times better than Mexico?
Yeah.
Is it 7 times better than Florida? It's like so. But no, travel's great. I think traveling in the States is fun. Bahamas is fun.
Who do you think has had the biggest impact on the direction of your life? Mentor, family, somebody you didn't expect? Who do you think?
Mentality-wise, my grandpa. I was really close with my grandpa. That's why my son is named Herb. And so he was always great. And he was kind of he wasn't really a mentor, but he was a soft mentor. He would step in. Right when I first thought I was a hot shot and was really rolling, and I switched banks. I didn't switch banks. I had a participating loan on some livestock, and of course he was on the bank board, and everybody was mad at me. And I was like, guys, it's a lower rate. I mean, I'm trying to make money here, trying to be a capitalist. And the loan officer was younger and good friend of mine, and he just sat me down. He goes, hey, I support you in whatever you do, but you're going to want to make a soft landing on this one. Don't, burn any bridges. And I took that to heart. Like, I think about that soft landing comment a lot of times when I'm mad, and that's been great. And then mentor wise, unfortunately, I didn't find one in the beef industry until I already learned all the hard lessons. So I would say if anybody wants me to be their beef industry mentor, you can get a lot out of me for not a lot, because I don't want to see people fail at that. Number one, a failed story there does not become a customer of mine. And number two, it wasn't that fun to learn it all on my own. Mm-hmm. And then cattle feeding wise, I got really lucky right at the end of kind of the golden era. I got to meet some of the greats like Bob Foote, and I got to meet, a lot of cool people in the Gotch family, and just some of these guys that were just legends, Charlie McVeigh, the trader. And that was incredible. And all those guys left me with a little piece. The only one that, and I, God rest his soul, he's passed, Jeff Biggert. I was sitting in a conversation like this, and I said, what is your biggest piece of advice, for a young guy? And I don't know if you'll even want to put this in, but he just looked at me and started laughing. He goes, never waste an erection. I think he's going through cancer, and he's like,
damn. Yeah. Well, so I think we can all agree. That's a good one to live by.
Yeah.
Would that be your biggest piece of advice you'd give somebody?
No, my biggest piece of advice is pick the right woman.
Pick the right woman.
Pick the right woman.
How do you find the right one? What are the things that you look for?
Oh, I don't know. Somebody that wants to be your partner. Brittany certainly doesn't dote over me, or sometimes I give her crap. I'm like, gosh, you're kind of cold, babe. Yeah. But she really wants to be my partner. She supported me through ridiculous circumstances, through huge life changes. And, we kind of knew that going into it. A lot of these things had already started to happen as we were dating, and she was just ultra supportive. Her family was ultra supportive. And having somebody you can just be completely open with and work towards a solution together is huge. Brittany, for example, though, I don't know how I got lucky enough to get her. Do you remember, you know how you have core memories from your childhood? Mm-hmm. I remember $1.80 being on our corn bid board in the office for some reason. and then I remember her father coming in there to service office supplies, but I never knew he had a daughter. Well, he knew our family. I knew their family. I didn't know him well enough to know he had a daughter. And I had dated date would be a loose term. I had an Instagram photo with a girl and that I posted. And then her dad went up to my mother in a restaurant randomly. He's like, "Hey, what's Blake up to?" Mom said, "Oh, I think Blake's getting married soon." I had no chance of getting married. I don't know why she said that. She was just riffing off. And Steve went back and told Brittany that. And she goes, "No, he's not. Who's he going to marry? He's not getting married." It was her. She's like, "I'm going to step in and fix this." And she did. It was night and day. It was like, I'd been chasing her for a year, on and off. And finally she's just like, "Oh, you might get married." Well, now I'm ready to go. So
yeah,
you gotta have some, it's kind of like a good sales deal. You have to have some reason to get after it, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say pick the right woman.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, Blake, we really appreciate you coming on the show, man.
This is great.
I think people got a lot of value, especially cattle, meat, any of that stuff. So follow Blake on X.
Yep.
Instagram.
Yep.
What's your handle again?
At Blake Albers. I keep it simple.
Blake Albers.
What's the website for your brand?
Albers Craft Meats.
Go check out Albers Crafts Meat. Share the show if you got any value. Leave a review on Spotify or Apple. You can always use code BarnTalk to save 10% off any farmer grade order. We love you guys. We appreciate you, and we'll see you back here next week for another episode.